nowhere to be found. The town buzzed with worry, search parties scoured the desert, but Clara Hensley had vanished without a trace, swallowed by the endless sands. For 9 years, her disappearance haunted Redstone, a mystery that refused to loosen its grip on the hearts of those who knew her. Then, one scorching afternoon, an oil drill in the middle of that same desert struck something strange, not oil, but metal, buried deep where no metal should have been. What they uncovered would send shockwaves through the town, unearthing secrets that had been buried for nearly a decade. But before we dive into that, let me take you somewhere else, to a crowded city bus hundreds of miles away, where a young man's small act of kindness set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. It was a sweltering summer day in Atlanta, the kind where the air feels thick enough to choke on. The bus was packed, standing room only, and the hum of conversation mixed with the rumble of the engine. Jamal Carter, a 17-year-old high school senior, stood near the back, his backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds dangling from his neck. He was just another kid heading home from a long day, his mind on basketball practice and the math homework he'd been putting off. Across from him, a pregnant woman struggled to keep her balance as the bus lurched forward. She was pale, her face flushed from the heat, one hand gripping the pole, the other cradling her swollen belly. Jamal didn't think twice. He stepped forward, flashed a shy smile, and offered her his seat. You need this more than me," he said, his voice soft but steady. The woman, Emily Vaughan, looked at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. She sank into the seat, her breath heavy, and murmured a quiet thank you. Most people on the bus didn't notice the exchange, it was just a moment, fleeting and small. But as Jamal moved to the back, Emily reached into her purse, scribbled something on a piece of paper, and pressed it into his hand before he could protest. "Read it later," she said, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. Jamal nodded, tucking the note into his pocket, unaware that those few words would change his life forever. Back in Redstone, the mystery of Clara's disappearance had never faded. Her ranch, once bustling with life, now sat quiet, the fences sagging, the fields overtaken by creosote and tumbleweeds. Her brother, Tom, still lived in the old family house, keeping the place running as best he could, though the weight of her absence hung over him like a storm cloud. He'd been one of the last to see her that morning, waving as she rode off, her hat tipped low against the sun. "Be careful out there," he'd called, half joking, because Clara was always careful. She knew the desert better than anyone, its hidden arroyos, its sudden storms, its unforgiving heat. So when she didn't come back, Tom knew something was wrong. The sheriff organized searches, volunteers combed the hills, and helicopters buzzed overhead, but the desert gave nothing away. Rumors swirled, maybe she'd been caught in a flash flood, or maybe she'd run off to start a new life. Some whispered darker theories, bandits, rustlers, or something worse. Clara wasn't just a rancher, she was a woman who'd fought tooth and nail to keep her land when developers came knocking, offering sums that would have tempted anyone else. Had she made enemies? Tom didn't want to believe it, but as the years passed, hope dwindled. Until that oil drill hit metal, and everything changed. On that Atlanta bus, Jamal didn't open the note right away. He shoved it deep into his pocket, figuring it was just a thank you, maybe a phone number or a kind word. He wasn't the type to make a big deal out of doing the right thing, it was how his mom raised him. Growing up in a neighborhood where trust was hard-earned, Jamal had learned to keep his head down and his heart open. He was a good kid, the kind who helped his neighbors carry groceries or stayed late to shoot hoops with his little brother. But life wasn't easy. His mom worked 2 jobs, and college felt like a dream just out of reach. When he finally got home that night, he pulled out the crumpled note and smoothed it on his kitchen table. The words, written in hurried cursive, made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't a thank you. It was something else entirely, something that tied him, inexplicably, to a mystery unfolding hundreds of miles away in a desert he'd never seen. In Redstone, the oil crew's discovery sent the town into a frenzy. The drill had stopped dead, its bit grinding against something solid, something that didn't belong in the middle of nowhere. The crew chief, a grizzled man named Hank, figured it was just a buried pipe or an old piece of machinery. But when they started digging, they found something far stranger, a rusted metal box, big enough to hold a person, sealed tight and buried deep. The sheriff was called, and soon half the town was gathered at the site, whispering under the blazing sun. Tom was there, his hands shaking as he watched them pry the box open. What was inside? Was it a clue to Clara's fate, or something else entirely? The desert had kept its secrets for 9 years, but now it was starting to talk. And what it had to say would shake Redstone to its core, connecting a vanished rancher to a young man in Atlanta who'd never even heard her name. Jamal's life, meanwhile, was about to take a turn he couldn't have imagined. The note from Emily wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a key, unlocking a door to a world he didn't know existed. It wasn't money or a job offer, though he could have used both. It was a message, cryptic and urgent, hinting at a truth buried far from the city streets he called home. As he read it again, his pulse quickened. Who was this woman, and why had she chosen him? He didn't know it yet, but that note would lead him to Redstone, to the desert, to the metal box, and to a story that had been waiting 9 years to be told. What was Clara hiding in that vast, lonely desert? What did Emily know, and why did her note feel like a warning? The answers are coming, but not tonight. Stick with me, because this is just the beginning, and the truth is wilder than you can imagine. The desert stretched out endless and unforgiving, its silence broken only by the faint hum of machinery as the oil crew worked to unearth the mysterious metal box. Tom Hensley stood at the edge of the site, his boots sinking into the hot sand, his eyes fixed on the rusted surface glinting under the noon sun. The air was thick with anticipation, and the crowd of townsfolk whispered theories. Some said it was an old safe, others thought it might be tied to the rumors of smugglers who used to cut through Redstone's backcountry. But Tom's gut told him this was about Clara. 9 years had passed since his sister vanished, and every day of those years had carved a deeper ache into his heart. He could still picture her that morning, her weathered hat tilted low, her voice sharp with that familiar determination as she called out, "Don't wait up, Tommy." She'd always called him that, even when they were kids, racing through the sagebrush, dreaming of running the ranch together. Now, as the crew pried at the box with crowbars, Tom's hands clenched, his mind racing with questions. Was Clara's disappearance tied to this thing buried in the desert? Had she stumbled onto something she shouldn't have? The metal groaned as it gave way, and a hush fell over the crowd. Whatever was inside, it was about to change everything. Hundreds of miles away, Jamal Carter sat on the edge of his bed, the note from Emily Vaughan trembling in his hands. The words were simple but heavy, written in blue ink that had smudged at the edges. Find the truth in Redstone. It's bigger than you know. Redstone? He'd never heard of it. The name sounded like something out of a movie, some dusty nowhere town lost in the middle of a desert. Jamal's first instinct was to toss the note, chalk it up to some weird misunderstanding. But something about Emily's eyes on that bus, the way they'd locked onto his, like she was seeing right through him, kept him from letting it go. He pulled out his phone and typed Redstone into the search bar. A small town in New Mexico popped up, barely a speck on the map, with articles about cattle ranches, oil drilling, and a missing woman. Clara Hensley. The name hit him like a jolt. Her story was everywhere: local news, old forum posts, even a grainy photo of a woman on horseback, her face half hidden by a cowboy hat. Jamal's heart pounded. Why would a stranger on a bus point him to this? He reread the note, his mind spinning. It's bigger than you know. What did that even mean? Was Emily connected to Clara? And why him? He was just a kid who gave up his seat. But the note felt like a hook, pulling him toward something he couldn't ignore. Back in Redstone, the metal box was finally open, but what lay inside only deepened the mystery. No body, no bones, just a collection of strange items that made no sense together. A worn leather journal, its pages yellowed and smudged with dirt. A small, tarnished locket with no picture inside. A map, hand-drawn, with cryptic markings that didn't match any known trails in the desert. And, strangest of all, a single bullet casing, gleaming like it had been polished. The sheriff, a no-nonsense woman named Maria Delgado, bagged the items carefully, her face unreadable. "This doesn't add up," she muttered, glancing at Tom. He wanted to grab the journal, to tear through its pages for answers, but Maria held firm. "We need to process this properly, Tom. You know that." The crowd dispersed, but the whispers grew louder. Some said Clara must have hidden the box before she disappeared, maybe as a message. Others thought it was a trap, left by someone who wanted her gone. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that the journal held the key. Clara had always kept one, scribbling her thoughts late at night by the fire. If she'd left this behind, it was deliberate. But why bury it? And why here, in the middle of nowhere? Jamal's mom, Keisha, noticed the change in him that night at dinner. He was quiet, pushing his food around his plate, his eyes distant. "You okay, baby?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. She worked long hours at the hospital and the diner, and Jamal hated worrying her. "Yeah, just thinking," he said, forcing a smile. He didn't mention the note. How could he explain it? It sounded crazy, even to him. After dinner, he slipped back to his room and opened his laptop, diving deeper into Redstone's story. The more he read about Clara, the more he felt a pull he couldn't explain. She wasn't just a missing person, she was a fighter, someone who'd stood up to big-money developers trying to buy her land for oil. There were old articles about protests, lawsuits, even threats against her. One post on a local forum caught his eye. Clara Hensley knew something she wasn't supposed to. "That's why she's gone." The words sent a chill down his spine. He thought of Emily, her urgent handwriting, her cryptic warning. Was she part of this? Had she known Clara? Jamal's fingers hovered over his phone. He wanted to find Emily, to ask her what she meant, but she'd given him no number, no last name, nothing but a name and a note. He was stuck, but the pull to Redstone was growing stronger. In Redstone, Tom couldn't sleep. The image of that box haunted him, its contents laid out like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. He sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at a photo of him and Clara from years back. They were laughing, standing by the old barn, her arms slung around his shoulders. She'd been the tough one, the one who never backed down, even when their parents died and left them the ranch. Developers had come sniffing around not long before she vanished, offering millions for the land. Clara had laughed in their faces. "This is our home," she'd said. "No amount of money changes that." But Tom knew it wasn't just about the land. Clara had been digging into something: late-night phone calls, hushed conversations with strangers at the diner. She'd never told him what, only that it was bigger than the ranch. He'd brushed it off then, but now, with that box in the desert, he wondered if she'd paid for her stubbornness. The journal was with the sheriff, locked up as evidence, but Tom's mind kept circling back to it. What had Clara written? And why had she hidden it where no one would find it until now? Jamal's search for answers hit a wall. Redstone was too far, and he had no money for a bus ticket, let alone a plane. But the note burned a hole in his pocket, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face, her quiet urgency. He started asking around, carefully, not wanting to sound like he was losing it. His best friend, Marcus, thought he was nuts. "You're chasing a ghost story, man," Marcus said, tossing a basketball between his hands. "Some lady hands you a weird note, and now you're what, a detective?" But Jamal couldn't let it go. He went to the library, digging through old newspapers online, looking for anything about Redstone or Clara. One article mentioned a woman named Emily Vaughan, a journalist who'd written about land disputes in the Southwest. Could it be the same Emily? The article was old, from a decade ago, but it described her as someone who didn't shy away from tough stories. Jamal's heart raced. If Emily was a journalist, maybe she'd been investigating Clara's case. Maybe she'd found something dangerous. He needed to know more, but the library's computers were slow, and his time was running out. He scribbled down what he could and headed home, the note still in his pocket, heavier than ever. In Redstone, the discovery of the box had stirred up old wounds. The diner, usually quiet, was packed with locals swapping theories over coffee and pie. Some said Clara had run off with a secret lover, leaving the box as a decoy. Others thought she'd crossed the wrong people, maybe the oil companies or someone tied to the land deals. Sheriff Delgado sat in a corner booth, listening but saying little. She'd been a deputy when Clara disappeared, and the case had always gnawed at her. She remembered Clara as fierce, the kind of woman who'd stare down anyone who tried to push her around. The journal was now at the station, and Maria had spent hours poring over it. The pages were filled with Clara's tight, slanted handwriting, but much of it was coded, strange symbols and shorthand that made no sense. The map was even stranger, with lines crisscrossing the desert, marked with numbers and letters that didn't match any known coordinates. Maria had sent it to a specialist in Santa Fe, but she wasn't holding her breath. The bullet casing bothered her most. It was clean, too clean, like it had been placed there on purpose. Was it a warning? A clue? She didn't know, but she wasn't about to let the town spiral into chaos. "We'll figure this out," she told Tom when he called, but her voice lacked conviction. The desert was good at keeping secrets, and this one felt bigger than Redstone. Jamal's nights were restless now. He kept dreaming of deserts he'd never seen, of a woman on horseback vanishing into the horizon. He'd wake up clutching the note, his heart pounding. His mom noticed the bags under his eyes and pressed him again. "What's going on, Jamal?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. He wanted to tell her, but how could he explain a feeling he didn't understand? Instead, he showed her the note, hoping she'd laugh it off or tell him what to do. Keisha read it, her brow furrowing. "This sounds like trouble," she said. "You don't know this woman. Why's she dragging you into something?" But Jamal couldn't shake the sense that he was meant to do this. He started saving every dollar he could, skipping lunch to pocket the change, picking up extra shifts at the corner store. He didn't know how he'd get to Redstone, but he knew he had to. The note wasn't just a message, it was a call, and ignoring it felt like turning his back on something important. He searched for Emily Vaughan online, but she was a ghost. No social media, no recent articles, just that one mention from years ago. Was she hiding? Or was she closer than he thought? In Redstone, Tom was losing patience. The sheriff's office was moving too slow, and the journal was still off limits. He started asking around town, talking to old-timers who'd known Clara, hoping for anything that might connect to the box. One name kept coming up, Ray Carver, a former ranch hand who'd worked for Clara before she vanished. Ray had left town abruptly after her disappearance, and some said he'd been too close to her, maybe too loyal. Tom tracked him down to a bar in Albuquerque, a dive where the air smelled of stale beer and regret. Ray was older now, his face lined, his hands calloused from years of hard work. "I don't know nothing about no box," he said when Tom pressed him, but his eyes darted away, and his voice shook. Tom didn't buy it. Ray knew something, and Tom wasn't leaving without answers. "She trusted you, Ray," Tom said, leaning in. "If you cared about her, tell me what you know." Ray's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it looked like he might bolt. Then he leaned back, his voice low. "Clara was into something dangerous. She wouldn't tell me everything, said it was for my own good. But that land, it's worth more than you think." Tom's blood ran cold. What had Clara been hiding? And why was it buried in the desert? Jamal's search for Emily led him to a dead end, but the pull to Redstone grew stronger. He started noticing things, strange cars parked too long outside his apartment, a man watching him at the bus stop, his phone glitching when he tried to search for Clara's case. Was he paranoid, or was someone keeping tabs on him? He confided in Marcus, who still thought he was chasing a wild theory. "You're gonna get yourself in trouble," Marcus warned, but Jamal couldn't stop. The note was a puzzle, and every piece he found, Clara's story, Emily's past, the desert, made it clearer that this was no coincidence. He saved enough for a bus ticket to New Mexico, but the night before he planned to leave, his mom found the ticket stub. "You're not going anywhere until you tell me what's going on," she said, her voice shaking. Jamal took a deep breath, ready to spill everything, but his phone buzzed. An unknown number. The text was short, "Stay away from Redstone. You don't know what you're walking into." His heart stopped. Was it Emily? Or someone else? The desert was calling, but now it felt like a warning. What was waiting for him in Redstone, and who didn't want him to find it? Jamal stared at the text on his phone, the words glowing in the dim light of his bedroom. "Stay away from Redstone. You don't know what you're walking into." His thumb hovered over the reply button, but what could he say? Who was this? The number was unknown, no name attached, and the message felt like a punch to the gut. He glanced at the bus ticket on his nightstand, the one he'd hidden from his mom until she'd found it. Keisha was still in the living room, her voice low as she talked on the phone with her sister, probably worrying about him. Jamal's heart raced. He wanted to tell her everything, the note from Emily, the mystery of Clara Hensley, the pull he felt toward a desert town he'd never seen, but the text stopped him cold. Was someone watching him? Had Emily's note put him in danger? He shoved the phone under his pillow and pulled out the note again, tracing the smudged ink with his finger. Find the truth in Redstone. The words felt like a dare now, but the warning text made it clear, chasing that truth might cost him. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the city outside his window doing nothing to calm his nerves. Redstone was out there, waiting, and so was whatever Clara had left behind. In Redstone, the desert night was quiet, but Tom Hensley's mind was anything but. He sat on the porch of the old ranch house, the creak of his rocking chair the only sound besides the distant yip of a coyote. Ray Carver's words from the bar in Albuquerque echoed in his head, "That land, it's worth more than you think." Tom had pressed him for more, but Ray had clammed up, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. Tom knew Ray was holding back, maybe out of fear, maybe out of guilt. Clara had trusted Ray, more than most. He'd been her right-hand man, fixing fences, rounding up cattle, always there when she needed him. But after she vanished, Ray had left town without a word, and now Tom wondered why. Had Ray known what Clara was digging into? Was he part of it? Tom's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the desert swallowed the stars. The metal box, the journal, the bullet casing, they were all pieces of a puzzle, but none of them fit yet. He thought of Clara's locket, empty and tarnished, found in that box. She'd worn it every day, a gift from their mom. Why leave it behind? Tom's chest tightened. He wasn't giving up, not when the answers were so close. Sheriff Maria Delgado sat at her desk, the station quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. The journal from the box lay open in front of her, its pages filled with Clara's cryptic shorthand. Maria had spent hours trying to crack it, but the symbols, loops, slashes, strange dots, made no sense. She rubbed her temples, frustration gnawing at her. Clara's disappearance had been her first big case as a deputy, and it had haunted her ever since. She remembered the search parties, the endless desert, the way Tom's face had crumpled when they found nothing. Now, with the box, she felt the weight of it all over again. The map was another dead end, its markings leading nowhere she could pinpoint. She'd sent it to a cartographer friend, but the response was vague, "It's not a standard map." Could be a code. The bullet casing, though, that kept her up at night. It was a .45, clean as a whistle, like it had never been fired. Why bury it with a journal and a locket? Was it a threat? A message? Maria's eyes flicked to a photo on her desk, her daughter smiling at a soccer game. She couldn't shake the feeling that this case was bigger than Redstone, and that digging deeper might stir up trouble she wasn't ready for. Jamal's morning was a blur. He skipped breakfast, his stomach too knotted to eat, and headed to the library before school. The text from last night had him spooked, but he couldn't stop now. He logged onto a computer and searched for anything connecting Emily Vaughan to Redstone. The old article about her as a journalist was all he had, but he found a grainy photo of her at a protest, holding a sign that read "Save Our Land." The date was 10 years ago, just before Clara vanished. Jamal's pulse quickened. Was Emily investigating the same developers Clara had fought? He scribbled notes, his handwriting messy, and searched for Redstone's land disputes. The articles painted a messy picture: oil companies, greedy developers, and ranchers like Clara standing their ground. One name popped up repeatedly: Harrington Energy, a company that had offered Clara millions for her land. They'd been aggressive, even threatening, according to some locals. Jamal's mind raced. Had Clara uncovered something about Harrington? Was that why she disappeared? He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone watching, but the library was quiet. He saved his notes and headed to class, the warning text still burning in his mind. In Redstone, the town was buzzing with new rumors. The diner was packed, locals leaning over coffee cups, whispering about the box. Some said Clara had hidden treasure, others thought she'd been mixed up with criminals. Hank, the oil crew chief, sat at the counter, nursing a soda. He'd been the one to call the sheriff when the drill hit metal, and now he wished he hadn't. The crew was spooked, talking about curses and ghosts, and the job was on hold until the sheriff cleared the site. Hank didn't buy the ghost stories, but he couldn't shake the unease. The desert had been a way of hiding things, and that box felt like a warning. He overheard a rancher at the next table mention Harrington Energy, the company behind the oil drill. "They've been sniffing around here for years," the rancher said. "Clara told them to get lost, and look what happened." Hank's jaw tightened. He'd worked for Harrington before, and they didn't play nice. If Clara had crossed them, maybe the box was their doing. He finished his soda and left, the weight of the desert pressing down on him. Jamal's day at school dragged. He couldn't focus. His mind on Redstone and the note. During lunch, he told Marcus everything, hoping his friend would talk him out of it. "You're in over your head," Marcus said, shaking his head. "What if that text is real? You don't even know what you're looking for." But Jamal couldn't explain the pull he felt, like the note was a thread tying him to something bigger. He thought of his mom, working herself to the bone, and how he'd always wanted to make her proud. Maybe this was his chance, not just to find answers, but to prove he could handle something real. After school, he went back to the corner store, picking up an extra shift. His boss, Mr. Lee, noticed his distraction. "You okay, kid?" he asked, ringing up a customer. Jamal nodded, but his mind was on elsewhere. He'd saved enough for the bus ticket, but the warning text made him hesitate. What if he went to Redstone and found nothing? Or worse, what if he found the truth and it was too much? He pocketed his tips and headed home, the note still in his wallet, a constant reminder. Tom wasn't joking with Carver. He'd driven back to the city, determined to get answers. The bar was emptier this time, and Ray was in the same corner booth, nursing a beer. Tom slid in across from him, his voice low. "I'm not leaving until you talk." Ray nodded, his shoulders side-slumping. "You don't get it," he said, his voice low. Clara was messing with people who scared. He glanced at around, like someone might be listening. Harrington Energy, they wanted her land, and bad. She'd found something, papers, proof they were pulling dirty tricks. She was going to the public. Tom's blood froze. Proof? Of what? Ray wouldn't say more, just shook his head. "I didn't left 'cause I was scared. You should be too." Tom wanted to grab him, shaking the truth out, but he didn't. Ray's fear was real. He left the bar, his mind spinning. Clara had been fighting Harrington, and now their drill had found her box. Was it a coincidence? Or had they known it was there? Sheriff Delgado wasn't done. She'd gotten a call from her contact in the Santa Fe about the map. "It's not a trail map," she said. "Looks like a survey, maybe for oil or minerals. But the coordinates were off, maybe like it's pointing to something else." Maria's stomach dropped. A survey. She knew that Clara had been vocal about keeping her land free of drills drilling. Had she found evidence of something valuable, something worth hiding for? She thought of the bullet casing again, its polished surface gleaming in her memory. She pulled up Harrington Energy's records, digging through permits and lawsuits. They'd been aggressive, buying up land around Redstone for years. Clara's ranch was one of the last holdouts. Maria's gut told her the box was connected, but she needed proof. She locked the journal in her safe, her hands shaking. This case was getting bigger, and she wasn't sure Redstone was ready for what came next. Jamal's phone buzzed again that night, another unknown number. This time, it was a voicemail. He hesitated, then played it, keeping the volume low so his mom wouldn't hear. A woman's voice, soft but urgent. "Jamal, it's Emily. Don't go to Redstone yet. I'll find you. Trust me." The message cut off, and Jamal's breath caught. Emily? How did she know his number? And why was she warning him now? He played it again, her voice sending chills down his spine. He wanted to call back, but the number was blocked. He thought of Clara, the box, the desert. Emily was out there, and she knew something. But the warning from the text and now her voicemail made Redstone feel like a trap. He clutched the note, his heart pounding. The truth was waiting, but so was danger, and Jamal wasn't sure which would find him first. Jamal's hands shook as he replayed Emily's voicemail, her voice echoing in the quiet of his room. "Don't go to Redstone yet. I'll find you. Trust me. The words felt like a lifeline and a warning all at once. He sat on the edge of his bed, the bus ticket to New Mexico crumpled in his fist. He'd saved every penny for it, but now doubt gnawed at him. Who was Emily, really? How did she know his number? And why was she so sure Redstone was dangerous? The text from the unknown number, "Stay away from Redstone," flashed in his mind, blending with Emily's urgent plea. He glanced at the note again, its smudged ink a constant pull. Find the truth in Redstone. It's bigger than you know. His mom was asleep now, the apartment silent except for the hum of the fridge. Jamal knew he couldn't tell her about the voicemail, not yet. She'd already threatened to ground him after finding the ticket. But the pull to Redstone was stronger than ever, like a magnet drawing him toward something he couldn't explain. He stuffed the ticket in his backpack and lay down, staring at the ceiling, his heart pounding. Tomorrow, he'd decide, stay safe in Atlanta or chase the truth in a desert that seemed to swallow people whole. In Redstone, the air was thick with tension. The town hadn't been this restless since Clara vanished 9 years ago. The metal box, now locked away in the sheriff's evidence room, had become the center of every conversation. At the diner, locals swapped theories over greasy plates of eggs and hash browns. Some said Clara had hidden the box to protect something valuable, maybe proof that Harrington Energy was up to no good. Others whispered darker ideas, that the bullet casing meant someone had silenced her for good. Tom Hensley sat in a corner booth, nursing a coffee, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Ray's words in Albuquerque haunted him. Clara was messing with people who don't play fair. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that Harrington Energy was at the heart of it. They'd been after Clara's land for years, and now their oil drill had struck that box, like they'd known it was there. He'd tried to get a look at the journal, but Sheriff Delgado was firm, no civilians, not even Clara's brother. Tom's fingers tightened around his mug. He wasn't waiting anymore. If the sheriff wouldn't move faster, he'd find answers himself, even if it meant digging into the desert alone. Sheriff Maria Delgado felt the weight of the town's eyes on her. The journal sat on her desk, its coded pages taunting her. She'd spent hours trying to decipher Clara's shorthand, but it was like reading a language from another world. The map was no better, its strange lines and numbers led nowhere, at least not on any map of Redstone she knew. Her contact in Santa Fe had called again, saying the survey might point to an old mineral deposit, something valuable enough to kill for. Maria's gut twisted. Clara had been fierce, the kind of woman who'd fight tooth and nail for her land. If she'd found proof that Harrington was hiding something, maybe illegal drilling or a cover-up, she'd have gone after them, no question. The bullet casing worried Maria most. It was too clean, too deliberate, like someone wanted it found. She glanced at her phone, tempted to call the FBI, but Redstone was small, and big agencies didn't care about a missing rancher or a rusted box. She leaned back, her chair creaking, and stared at the locket from the box. Why had Clara left it behind? Maria's daughter's laughter echoed in her mind, and she pushed the thought away. This case was personal now, and she wasn't backing down. Jamal woke to a knock on his door. It was Marcus, his face serious. "You're still thinking about that note, aren't you?" he asked, stepping inside. Jamal nodded, showing him the voicemail transcript he'd written down. Marcus read it, his eyes narrowing. "Man, this is bad news. You don't even know this Emily chick. What if she's setting you up?" Jamal didn't have an answer, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was trying to protect him, not trap him. He told Marcus about Harrington Energy, the articles about Clara's fight, and the box in the desert. Marcus shook his head. "You're crazy, man. You're gonna walk into some desert mess and get yourself hurt." But Jamal wasn't listening. He'd made up his mind. He grabbed his backpack, the ticket tucked inside, and headed for the bus station before his mom could stop him. As he boarded the Greyhound, his phone buzzed again, no number, just a single word, "Don't." His stomach dropped, but the bus doors hissed shut, and Atlanta faded behind him. Redstone was waiting, and so was the truth, but Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a storm. In Redstone, Tom was done waiting. He'd heard through the grapevine that Harrington Energy was sending a representative to town, supposedly to cooperate with the sheriff about the box. Tom didn't buy it. He drove out to Clara's ranch, the old place creaking under years of neglect. The barn still stood, its red paint peeling, and he slipped inside, the air thick with dust and memories. Clara had kept a small office in the back, a cluttered desk where she'd scribble in her journal or pore over land deeds. Tom hadn't touched it since she vanished, but now he tore through it, looking for anything, a note, a file, a clue. Under a stack of papers, he found a crumpled letter from Harrington Energy, dated a month before Clara disappeared. It wasn't an offer, it was a threat, veiled in corporate jargon, warning her to sell or face consequences. Tom's blood boiled. Had they followed through? He stuffed the letter in his pocket and headed for the desert, following a hunch. The map from the box was still with the sheriff, but Tom knew Clara's land like the back of his hand. If she'd hidden something else, he'd find it. Maria got a tip that morning a hiker had seen a strange marker in the desert, not far from where the box was found. It was a pile of stones, arranged in a way that didn't look natural, with a piece of metal glinting in the center. She drove out alone, her cruiser bouncing over the rough terrain. The desert was vast, but Maria knew its secrets, or thought she did. When she found the marker, her heart sank. It was deliberate, like the box, and the metal piece was another bullet casing, identical to the one in evidence. She bagged it, her hand steady but her mind racing. 2 casings, both clean, both buried. This wasn't random. She radioed for backup, but the signal was weak, and the desert felt heavier than usual, like it was watching her. She thought of Clara, riding out here alone, and a chill ran through her. Had Clara left these markers as a trail? Or had someone else, someone who wanted the truth buried with her? Maria's phone buzzed, a text from her deputy, Harrington Rep just arrived. Asking for you. She cursed under her breath. The timing was too perfect. Jamal's bus rolled through the night, the hum of the engine lulling him into a restless doze. He dreamed of deserts and metal boxes, of Clara's face from the old photos, her eyes sharp and fearless. When he woke, the bus was pulling into a small station, the sign reading Redstone, NM. The town was smaller than he'd imagined, a cluster of low buildings dwarfed by the endless desert. He stepped off, his backpack heavy, and felt eyes on him, locals staring at the kid from out of town. He didn't know where to start, but the note burned in his pocket, and Emily's voicemail echoed in his head. He found the diner, figuring it was as good a place as any, and slid into a booth. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, brought him a Coke. "You're not from here," she said, not a question. Jamal nodded, unsure how much to say. "I'm looking into Clara Hensley," he said finally, his voice low. The waitress's face changed, her smile fading. "You're stirring up ghosts, kid," she said, glancing around. "Be careful who you ask." Before he could press her, a man in a suit walked in, polished, out of place. He sat at the counter, his eyes scanning the room, and Jamal's gut twisted. Was this the Harrington Rep? Or someone worse? Tom was deep in the desert now, following a faint trail he remembered from years ago, when he and Clara used to ride out to check the fences. The map from the box wasn't with him, but he'd memorized its strange lines, and something about this spot felt right. The sun was brutal, his water bottle nearly empty, but he kept going, driven by the letter in his pocket and Ray's warning. He stumbled across another marker, stones piled high, a third bullet casing gleaming in the center. His heart pounded. Clara had left these, he was sure of it. A trail, a message, a warning. He knelt, brushing sand away, and found a small metal tin, rusted but intact. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded tight, with Clara's handwriting. "They're watching. Don't trust anyone." Tom's breath caught. Who was they? Harrington? Someone else? He heard a vehicle in the distance, the rumble of an engine cutting through the desert's silence. He shoved the tin in his jacket and crouched behind a rock, his pulse racing. Someone was coming, and he wasn't sure he wanted to be found. Maria met the Harrington Rep at the station, a slick man named Paul Grayson who smiled too easily. He claimed the company was concerned about the box, offering to fund the investigation. Maria didn't trust him. His suit was too clean for Redstone, his words too rehearsed. She kept the journal and casings locked away, giving him nothing but vague answers. Grayson's eyes lingered on her desk, like he knew what was there. Clara Hensley was a stubborn woman, he said, his tone casual but sharp. Sometimes that gets people in trouble. Maria's jaw tightened. Was that a threat? She excused herself, saying she had a call, but her mind was on the second bullet casing. She needed to get back to the desert, to follow the trail Clara had left. As she grabbed her keys, her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Sheriff. For your daughter's sake." Her blood ran cold. She looked out the window, where Grayson was climbing into a black SUV. The desert was closing in, and the truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. Jamal left the diner, his heart pounding. The waitress's warning and the man in the suit had him on edge. He wandered Redstone's dusty streets, looking for anything that might connect to Clara or Emily. He found the sheriff's station, a small building with a faded sign, and hesitated. Should he tell them about the note, the voicemail? Before he could decide, a pickup truck roared past, kicking up dust. The driver, a man with a weathered face, stared at him a little too long. Jamal's phone buzzed again. No number, just a message. "You're here. Meet me at the old barn on Hensley Road. Midnight." His breath caught. Emily? Or a trap? He didn't know, but Redstone was alive with secrets, and he was in the middle of them. The desert loomed around him, vast and silent, and Jamal felt the weight of Clara's mystery pressing down. The truth was out there, in the sand, in the shadows, and he was closer than ever, but so was whatever had kept it hidden for 9 years. Jamal stood frozen on the dusty Redstone street, the text from the unknown number burning in his mind. "Meet me at the old barn on Hensley Road. Midnight." The words felt like a hook, pulling him deeper into a mystery he barely understood. His heart pounded as he glanced around, half expecting to see the man in the suit from the diner or the weathered driver of the pickup truck watching him. The desert air was cool now, the sun long gone, and Redstone felt like a ghost town, its secrets buried in the shadows. He didn't know if the message was from Emily or someone else, but the idea of walking into an abandoned barn in the middle of nowhere made his stomach churn. He thought of Clara Hensley, her disappearance, the metal box, and the bullet casings, each piece of the puzzle pointing to something dangerous. Jamal clutched the note in his pocket, its smudged ink a reminder of why he'd come. Find the truth in Redstone, it said, but now he wondered if the truth was a trap. He checked his phone. 11:15 p.m. He had less than an hour to decide. His mom's voice echoed in his head, warning him to stay safe, but he'd come too far to turn back. He started walking toward Hensley Road, the desert stretching out like a warning he couldn't ignore. Tom crouched behind the rock, the rumble of the approaching vehicle growing louder. The tin he'd found, with Clara's scrawled note, "They're watching. Don't trust anyone," was heavy in his jacket. His breath was shallow, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. The headlights cut through the night, bouncing over the uneven desert terrain. Tom's mind raced. Was it the sheriff? Harrington Energy? Or someone worse? He thought of the letter from Harrington he'd found in Clara's barn, its veiled threat chilling him anew: sell or face consequences. Clara had never backed down, but had that defiance cost her everything? The vehicle stopped, its engine idling, and Tom heard voices, low, urgent, too far to make out. He peeked over the rock and saw 2 figures, one holding a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the sand. They were near the stone marker where he'd found the tin, and one of them knelt, brushing at the ground. Tom's heart sank. They were looking for something, maybe the same thing Clara had hidden. He wanted to run, to confront them, but Clara's warning held him back. He stayed low, his pulse hammering, as the figures moved closer. Then, a glint of metal caught the flashlight's beam, another bullet casing, half buried. Tom's blood ran cold. How many more were out here? And who was leaving them? Sheriff Maria Delgado sped toward the desert, her cruiser's tires kicking up dust. The text she'd received, "Stop digging, Sheriff. For your daughter's sake," had shaken her, but she wasn't backing down. She'd left the Harrington rep, Paul Grayson, at the station, his slick smile lingering in her mind like a bad taste. His offer to fund the investigation felt like a bribe, and his comment about Clara being stubborn was too pointed to ignore. Maria's radio crackled, her deputy's voice breaking through. "Sheriff, "We got a report of lights in the desert, near the Hensley ranch." Could be nothing, but Maria's grip tightened on the wheel. Nothing in Redstone was nothing anymore. She thought of the second bullet casing she'd found, identical to the one in the box, and now this report of lights. Clara's journal, still locked in her safe, was starting to feel like a ticking bomb. She'd cracked a small piece of the code that morning, just a phrase: "The well runs deep," but it raised more questions than answers. Was it a metaphor? A clue to an actual well? Harrington Energy was drilling for oil, but what if Clara had found something else, something worth burying her for? Maria's phone buzzed again, another unknown number. "You're getting close." Too close. She slammed the accelerator, the desert blurring past. Someone was watching, and they knew exactly what she was doing. Jamal reached Hensley Road, his sneakers crunching on the gravel. The barn loomed ahead, a sagging silhouette against the starlit sky. It was exactly the kind of place you'd see in a horror movie, and every instinct screamed at him to turn back. But the note, the voicemail, the pull of Clara's mystery, they kept him moving. He checked his phone, 11:50 p.m. The text had said midnight, and he was early, but the barn was dark, no sign of anyone. He crept closer, his heart thumping so loud he was sure it'd give him away. The air smelled of dust and old wood, and a faint rustle came from inside, like something or someone moving. He froze, his hand on the barn door. Was Emily inside? Or was this the trap Marcus had warned him about? He thought of the man in the suit at the diner, the way his eyes had scanned the room, and the pickup truck driver who'd stared too long. Redstone was small, but it felt like a maze of secrets, and Jamal was caught in the middle. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the creak echoing in the silence. "Hello," he whispered, his voice barely audible. No answer, but the rustle came again, closer now. Then, a shadow moved in the corner, and Jamal's breath caught. He wasn't alone. Tom watched as the two figures in the desert packed up and drove off, their taillights fading into the night. He waited, counting to 100, before standing. The tin was still in his jacket, Clara's note burning a hole in his mind. They're watching. He didn't know who they were, but Harrington Energy was at the top of his list. The letter he'd found proved they'd threatened Clara, and Ray's fear in Albuquerque confirmed they weren't just businessmen. Tom started back toward his truck, his flashlight off to avoid drawing attention. The desert was alive with sounds now: crickets, wind, the distant hum of another engine. He froze, listening. Another vehicle? Or the same one, circling back? He quickened his pace, the third bullet casing and Clara's note weighing him down. When he reached his truck, he found the driver's side door ajar, though he was sure he'd locked it. His heart skipped. Someone had been here. He checked the glove box, nothing missing, but a single sheet of paper lay on the seat, unmarked except for one word in bold black ink: "Stop." Tom's hands shook. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone knew he was out here, and they wanted him scared. He climbed in, started the engine, and headed for the ranch, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The desert wasn't empty anymore. Maria's cruiser skidded to a stop near the Hensley ranch, her headlights catching the glint of Tom's truck in the distance. She'd followed the report of lights, but now she saw something else, a faint glow near the old barn. Her radio crackled again, her deputy's voice urgent: "Sheriff, we got a call about a kid snooping around town, asking about Clara." Not a local. Maria's mind raced. A kid. In Redstone. She grabbed her flashlight and headed toward the barn, her hand resting on her holster. The desert was quiet, too quiet, and the glow from the barn flickered like someone was inside. She thought of the text about her daughter, the threat hanging over her like a storm cloud. Whoever was behind this knew her weaknesses, and that made them dangerous. As she approached the barn, she heard a voice, young, shaky, calling out, "Hello?" Her heart stopped. She clicked off her flashlight and moved closer, her boots silent on the sand. The barn door was open, and a figure stood inside, small and hesitant. A kid, just like her deputy said. But before she could call out, a second figure emerged from the shadows, and Maria's hand went to her gun. This wasn't just a kid stumbling into trouble, this was something bigger. Jamal's eyes adjusted to the dim barn, the shadow in the corner taking shape. It was a woman, her face half hidden in the dark, but her voice was unmistakable. "Jamal," she whispered, stepping forward. It was Emily Vaughan, her eyes wide with fear and urgency. "You shouldn't be here." Jamal's mouth went dry. "You told me to find the truth," he stammered, holding up the note. Emily shook her head, her hands trembling. "I didn't know they'd find you so fast." Before he could ask who they were, a low rumble cut through the silence. An engine, close and getting closer. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the back of the barn. "We have to hide," she hissed. Jamal's heart pounded as they ducked behind a stack of old hay bales, the smell of mold and dust choking him. Headlights swept through the barn's cracks, and boots crunched outside. Emily's grip tightened, her breath shallow. "They know about the box," she whispered. "And they know you're here." Jamal's mind spun. Harrington? The man in the suit? The driver? He wanted to ask, but the door creaked open, and heavy footsteps echoed inside. A voice, cold and sharp, called out, "Come out, kid. We just want to talk." Jamal's blood froze. Emily's eyes met his, and in that moment, he knew this wasn't just about Clara anymore. It was about him, too. Tom pulled into the ranch, his truck's engine still running as he scanned the darkness. The note on his seat, "Stop," was stuffed in his pocket now, next to Clara's tin. He didn't know who'd left it, but he wasn't stopping. Not when he was this close. He grabbed his flashlight and headed for the barn, where Clara used to keep her journals. Maybe there was another clue, something he'd missed. But as he got closer, he saw headlights, 2 vehicles, one a sheriff's cruiser, the other a black SUV like the one Paul Grayson had driven. His stomach dropped. Then he heard voices from the barn, one young and scared, another sharp and commanding. He crept closer, staying low, and peered through a gap in the wood. A kid was inside, backed against the wall, and a woman was with him, her face pale but determined. A man in a suit, Grayson, stood at the door, his hand on something under his jacket. Tom's heart raced. This was no coincidence. Clara's trail had led him here, and now the desert was pulling everyone together: Jamal, Maria, Emily, Grayson. The truth was close, but so was the danger, and Tom knew one wrong move could bury it forever. Maria crouched outside the barn, her gun drawn but low. The kid inside, Jamal, she'd heard the woman call him, was in over his head. The woman's voice was familiar, though Maria couldn't place it. But the man at the door, the one from Harrington, was trouble. She'd seen his type before, corporate sharks who thought they owned everything, even the truth. She edged closer, her radio off to avoid giving herself away. The second text, "You're getting close." Too close, flashed in her mind, but she pushed it down. Her daughter was safe, at home with her mother, and Maria wasn't letting fear stop her. She heard Grayson's voice again. "We know you have it, kid. Hand it over." "Have what?" "The note." "Something else?" Maria's mind raced to the journal, the map, the casings. Had Clara left something more, something this kid had stumbled onto? She slipped around the barn, looking for another way in, when a hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun, gun raised, and saw Tom Hensley, his face grim. "Don't shoot," he whispered, holding up Clara's tin. "I found something." Maria's eyes widened, but before she could speak, a shout came from inside the barn, followed by the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. The desert held its breath, and the truth was about to break free or be buried forever. The barn was a pressure cooker, the air thick with fear and the sharp tang of old hay. Jamal's back pressed against the hay bales, Emily's hand tight on his arm, her breath shallow as the man in the suit, Paul Grayson, stood at the barn door, his voice cutting through the silence. "Come out, kid. We know you have it." Jamal's heart pounded, his mind racing. Have what? The note. He didn't have anything else. Emily's eyes, wide and desperate, locked onto his, whispering, "Stay quiet. They'll kill for it." The click of Grayson's gun echoed, and Jamal's stomach twisted. Outside, Maria froze, her own gun raised, Tom at her side clutching the tin with Clara's note. The sheriff's eyes darted between Tom and the barn, her mind piecing together the puzzle, Clara's journal, the bullet casings, the threats. She whispered to Tom, "Stay here. Cover me." Tom nodded, his face pale but set, the weight of Clara's warning, "They're watching," heavy in his chest. Maria slipped toward the barn's side entrance, her boots silent on the sand, as Grayson's voice grew sharper. "Last chance, kid." Inside, Jamal felt Emily tense, her hand reaching into her jacket. She pulled out a small, worn USB drive, her voice barely audible. "This is what they want. Clara's proof." Jamal's eyes widened. "Proof? Of what?" Maria eased the side door open, her gun steady, her heart racing. The barn was dark, but she could see Grayson's silhouette, his gun glinting in the faint moonlight. Jamal and Emily were hidden, but their shadows flickered against the wall. Maria's mind flashed to the journal's decoded phrase, "The well runs deep," and the map's strange survey lines. Clara had found something Harrington energy would kill to keep buried. She stepped forward, her voice firm. "Drop the gun, Grayson." He spun, his face twisting with surprise, then a cold smile. "Sheriff, you're in over your head." Before Maria could respond, a shot rang out, not from Grayson, but from outside. Tom stumbled into the barn, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. "They're here," he gasped, collapsing. Maria's heart stopped. "They?" She turned, expecting Harrington's men, but saw no one, just the desert, dark and endless. Grayson laughed, low and chilling. "You think this is just about me?" Jamal's breath caught as Emily shoved the USB drive into his hand. "Run," she whispered. "Get it to someone who can expose them." Jamal's legs moved before his mind caught up, bolting for the back of the barn. Grayson fired, the bullet splintering wood inches from Jamal's head. Emily screamed, tackling Grayson, her small frame no match for his strength. Maria fired a warning shot, shouting, "Freeze," but Grayson shoved Emily aside and ran into the night. Maria rushed to Tom, who was gasping, his face pale. "The tin," he choked out, pointing to his jacket. Maria grabbed it, finding Clara's note and a tiny key taped inside. Her mind raced, the key had to fit something, maybe another box, maybe the well from Clara's journal. She helped Tom to his feet, her eyes on Jamal, who was halfway out the back door, the USB drive clenched in his fist. "Kid, wait," she called, but he was gone, sprinting into the desert. Emily staggered to her feet, her face bruised but fierce. "He's got it," she said, her voice shaking. "Clara's evidence, Harrington's been drilling illegally, poisoning the water. She was going to expose them." Maria's blood ran cold. Poisoned water? That's what Clara had died for. Jamal ran, the desert swallowing him, his lungs burning. The USB drive felt like a bomb in his hand, and he could hear shouts behind him, Grayson, maybe others. The note from Emily, the warnings, Clara's disappearance, it all clicked. Harrington Energy wasn't just after oil, they were covering up something deadly, and Clara had paid the price. He stumbled over a rock, catching himself, and saw a faint glow ahead, a pile of stones, another marker like the ones Tom had found. He knelt, heart pounding, and brushed away sand, revealing a small metal hatch, rusted but locked. A keyhole glinted in the moonlight. Jamal's mind flashed to the tin Maria had held. Did it have a key? He heard footsteps closing in, and panic surged. He didn't have the key, but he couldn't let Harrington get the drive. He shoved it into a crack in the stones, covering it with sand, and ran again, his sneakers pounding the earth. The desert was vast, but he felt eyes everywhere, the same eyes Clara's note had warned about. Maria and Emily helped Tom to the cruiser, his blood staining the sand. Maria's radio crackled, her deputy, frantic, "Sheriff, we've got men at the station. They're demanding the journal." Maria's jaw tightened. Harrington was moving fast, tying up loose ends. She handed Tom to Emily, who was shaking but resolute. "Get him to the hospital," Maria said. "I'm going after the kid." She grabbed the tin, the key inside glinting, and ran toward where Jamal had disappeared. The desert was a maze, but the markers, Clara's markers, guided her. She found the hatch, the sand disturbed where Jamal had been. Her fingers fumbled with the key, and it clicked, the hatch groaning open. Inside was a waterproof case, and within it, documents, land surveys, water tests, proof that Harrington's drilling had contaminated Redstone's groundwater. Clara's handwriting was scrawled on the margins, "They'll kill to keep this quiet." Maria's heart sank. This was why Clara vanished, why the box was buried, why bullet casings marked the trail. She grabbed the case, but a shadow loomed behind her. Grayson, his gun raised. "You should have stopped, Sheriff." Jamal circled back, his breath ragged, his mind screaming at him to keep running but his heart pulling him to the barn. He couldn't leave Emily or the sheriff. He crept through the sagebrush, staying low, and saw Maria at the hatch, Grayson's gun aimed at her back. Jamal's eyes darted to the sand where he'd hidden the USB drive. He didn't know what was on it, but Emily's words, Clara's proof, meant it was everything. He grabbed a rock, his hands trembling, and threw it, aiming for Grayson's head. It missed, but the sound made Grayson turn, giving Maria a split second to dive for cover. She fired, her bullet grazing Grayson's arm, and he stumbled, cursing, before vanishing into the dark. Jamal ran to Maria, his voice shaking. "I hid it, the drive Emily gave me." Maria's eyes widened, but before she could speak, headlights swept across the desert. Another SUV, more men. Harrington wasn't done. Maria grabbed Jamal's arm, pulling him toward her cruiser. "We need to move," she said, clutching the case. "This ends now." They reached the cruiser, Tom and Emily already inside, Tom pale but conscious. Maria floored it, the desert blurring past as she radioed for backup, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We've got evidence," she said. "Harrington's dirty, and they're after us." The deputy's response was garbled, but Maria didn't care. She had Clara's documents, Jamal's drive, and the truth: Harrington had poisoned Redstone's water, and Clara had died to expose it. The bullet casings were her markers, leading to the proof she'd hidden before they took her. Maria glanced at Jamal, who was clutching the note, his face set. "You did good, kid," she said. He nodded, but his eyes were on the rearview mirror, where headlights were gaining. Emily leaned forward, her voice low. "There's a reporter in Santa Fe. Get the drive to her. She'll blow this wide open." Maria nodded, her hands tight on the wheel. They were close, so close, to justice for Clara. But then, the twist came. As they sped toward town, a figure stumbled into the road, forcing Maria to swerve. It was Ray Carver, his face blooded, his eyes wild. "They've got my family," he gasped, collapsing against the cruiser. Tom's head snapped up, his voice hoarse. "Ray, you're with them." Ray shook his head, tears mixing with blood. "I didn't want to, Tom. They made me watch her, report back. Clara trusted me, and I betrayed her." Maria's heart sank. Ray had been Harrington's eyes, feeding them Clara's moves, leading them to her that day in the desert. But now he was here, broken, claiming they'd turned on him too. "There's another box," Ray said, his voice fading. "Under the well. Clara's last message." Jamal's breath caught, his mind flashing to the journal's phrase, "The well runs deep." Was there more? Before Maria could ask, the headlights closed in, and a shot shattered the cruiser's back window. Grayson's men were here, and time was running out. The truth was in their hands, but the desert wasn't done with its secrets, and Clara's final message was still out there, waiting to change everything. The cruiser's back window shattered, glass spraying across the seats as Maria swerved to avoid another shot. Ray Carver slumped against the door, his blooded face pale, his words about Clara's final box under the well echoing in Jamal's mind. The headlights of Harrington Energy's SUV bore down, their engines roaring like predators in the desert night. Maria's hands were steady on the wheel, her voice sharp as she shouted into the radio, "Back up, now. We're under fire." The static crackled, her deputy's voice faint but promising state police were en route. Tom groaned in the back, his shoulder wound bleeding through Emily's makeshift bandage, his eyes locked on Ray with a mix of betrayal and pain. "You sold her out," Tom rasped, his voice raw. Ray's head hung low, tears cutting tracks through the blood on his cheeks. "I didn't have a choice, Tom. They had my kids." Jamal clutched the note in his pocket, his heart pounding. The USB drive he'd hidden in the desert, Clara's documents in Maria's hands, Ray's confession, it was all coming together, but the danger wasn't over. The desert stretched around them, vast and unforgiving, and Clara's last message was still out there, waiting to be found. Maria floored the gas, the cruiser bouncing over the rough terrain as she aimed for Redstone's main road. The SUV was close, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. Jamal's mind raced, flashing to the hatch he'd found, the marker stones, the phrase from Clara's journal, "The well runs deep." Ray's mention of a box under the well felt like the final piece, but they couldn't stop now, not with Grayson's men on their tail. Emily leaned forward, her voice urgent despite her bruised face. "The well's on Clara's ranch, near the old pump house. If there's another box, it's there." Maria nodded, her jaw tight. "We get to town, drop Tom and Ray at the hospital, then head for the ranch." Jamal's stomach twisted. "What about the drive I hid?" Maria glanced at him, her eyes fierce. "We'll get it, kid. You did good." But the SUV swerved, clipping the cruiser's bumper, and Maria cursed, fighting to keep control. A shot rang out, grazing the side mirror, and Jamal ducked, his breath hitching. Emily grabbed his hand, her grip steady. "We're gonna make it," she said, but her voice shook. The desert wasn't letting them go easily, and Harrington was desperate to bury the truth. The cruiser hit pavement, the sudden smoothness jarring as Maria sped toward Redstone's lights. The SUV fell back slightly, but its headlights stayed locked on them. Jamal's mind spun, Clara's fight against Harrington, the poisoned water, Ray's betrayal. He thought of his mom back in Atlanta, how she'd begged him to stay safe. He'd come to Redstone chasing a note from a stranger, and now he was in the middle of a war. "Why me?" he whispered, not realizing he'd spoken aloud. Emily's eyes softened. "Clara trusted me to find someone who'd care enough to act. That day on the bus, I saw it in you." Jamal's chest tightened. He'd just given up his seat, a small thing, but it had led him here, to this moment. The hospital's neon sign appeared ahead, and Maria skidded into the lot, shouting for help as nurses rushed out. Tom and Ray were pulled from the cruiser, Tom glaring at Ray even as he swayed from blood loss. "Find it," Tom said to Maria, his voice weak. "For Clara." Ray's eyes met Jamal's, full of regret. "I'm sorry," he mouthed before the doors closed. Maria didn't wait, peeling out toward the Hensley ranch, the SUV still trailing. The ranch was dark, the old house a shadow against the starry sky. Maria killed the headlights, coasting toward the pump house Emily had mentioned. The SUV's lights were gone now, but Jamal's skin prickled, they weren't alone. Maria handed Emily her backup pistol, her voice low. "You know how to use this?" Emily nodded, her face set. Jamal's heart pounded, he had no weapon, just the note and a burning need to finish what Clara started. They slipped out, crouching low, the desert air cool and sharp. The pump house was a rusted shed, the well capped beside it. Maria scanned the ground, her flashlight catching a faint outline in the dirt, a trapdoor, barely visible. "This is it," she whispered, prying it open. The SUV's engine roared in the distance, closing fast, and Jamal's breath caught. Maria dropped into the well, her flashlight beam revealing a small metal box, locked tight. She pulled the key from Clara's tin, her hand steady despite the approaching headlights. The lock clicked, and inside was a single audio recorder, its red light still glowing faintly. Clara's voice filled the silence, strong and clear. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. Harrington's poisoning Redstone's water. The proof's in the hatch. Don't let them win." The SUV skidded to a stop, doors slamming as Grayson and two men stepped out, guns drawn. Maria climbed out, the recorder in one hand, her gun in the other. "It's over, Grayson," she shouted. "We've got Clara's proof." Grayson's smile was cold, his arm bleeding from her earlier shot. "You think a few papers and a recording will stop us? Hand it over, Sheriff, or the kid dies." Jamal's heart stopped as a gun pressed against his temple. One of Grayson's men had circled behind. Emily raised her pistol, but Grayson laughed. "Drop it, or he's gone." Maria's eyes flicked to Jamal, then to the desert where he'd hidden the USB drive. She tossed the recorder to Grayson, who caught it, smirking. "Smart choice." But Jamal saw Maria's hand move, subtle and fast, slipping something to Emily, a key, the same one from the tin. Emily's eyes widened, understanding dawning. Maria was buying time. Jamal's voice shook as he spoke, drawing Grayson's attention. "You killed Clara for this, didn't you?" Grayson's smirk faltered. "She was too stubborn for her own good." Emily moved, diving for the sagebrush as Maria shouted, "Now!" Jamal ducked, the gun at his head shifting just enough for him to twist free. Maria fired, hitting Grayson's leg, and he fell, the recorder skittering across the sand. The second man lunged, but Emily fired, her shot wild but enough to make him hesitate. Jamal ran, his legs pumping, toward the marker where he'd hidden the USB drive. The desert was chaos, gunfire, shouts, the screech of tires as another vehicle approached. State police, their lights flashing, roared into the ranch, officers spilling out with weapons raised. Grayson's men froze, then dropped their guns, hands up. Grayson tried to crawl for the recorder, but Maria kicked it away, her gun trained on him. "You're done," she said, her voice like steel. Jamal reached the marker, digging frantically until his fingers closed around the USB drive. He held it up, his chest heaving, as an officer ran to him. "I've got it," he shouted. The desert fell silent, the truth finally free. The aftermath was a blur. Grayson and his men were cuffed, hauled into police vans as the state police secured the ranch. Maria handed over Clara's documents and the recorder, her face grim but relieved. The USB drive, recovered by Jamal, contained digital copies of the same evidence, water tests, internal Harrington memos, proof of illegal drilling and contamination. Emily, battered but alive, explained her role. A journalist who'd worked with Clara years ago, she'd gone underground after Clara vanished, waiting for the right moment to act. Jamal's kindness on that Atlanta bus had been her signal he was someone she could trust. Tom survived his wound, though his trust in Ray was shattered. Ray, recovering in the hospital, confessed fully, his guilt over betraying Clara eating him alive. Harrington Energy's executives faced arrests, their empire crumbling as the evidence hit the news. Redstone's water was tested, confirming Clara's fears, contaminated, but treatable now that the truth was out. The town mourned Clara, her sacrifice finally understood. Jamal sat on the ranch's porch the next morning, the desert quiet under the rising sun. Maria joined him, her sheriff's badge glinting. "You're a brave kid," she said, handing him a Coke from the diner. Jamal shrugged, the note from Emily still in his pocket. "I just did what felt right." Maria smiled, but her eyes were distant. "Clara would have liked you." They talked about the Wells box, Clara's final message tying everything together. The bullet casings, Maria explained, were Clara's way of marking her trail empty, like her hope that anyone would find it in time. Jamal thought of his mom, who'd been frantic when he called her from the sheriff's station. She was on her way now, and he knew he'd have to face her worry. But he felt different, stronger, like he'd carried something heavy and set it down. Emily appeared, her bruises fading, a notebook in hand. "I'm writing Clara's story," she said. "You're in it." Jamal blushed, shaking his head. "I'm nobody special." Emily's eyes were firm. "You're wrong. You changed everything." The final twist came quietly, not in gunfire but in a letter Maria found in Clara's house, tucked in a drawer Tom had missed. It was addressed to him, written the day she vanished. "Tommy," it read, "if I'm gone, don't hate Ray. He's trapped, like me. The truth's in the desert, follow the markers. I love you." Tom broke down reading it, his anger at Ray softening into grief. Clara had known Ray was compromised, but she'd forgiven him, her heart bigger than her fight. The letter also mentioned a trust fund she'd set up, hidden from Harrington, to protect the ranch. It was enough to rebuild, to keep her legacy alive. Tom decided to use it for Redstone, funding clean water systems and a memorial for Clara, a stone marker, like the ones she'd left, etched with "the well runs deep." Jamal, back in Atlanta, carried that phrase with him, a reminder that small acts, like giving up a seat, could ripple into something bigger. Redstone healed slowly, the scars of Harrington's greed fading as the town came together. Maria stayed on as sheriff, her daughter's laughter a reminder of why she'd fought. Emily's article, published in a major outlet, went viral, ensuring Clara's story reached the world. Jamal graduated high school, his mom beaming, the note from Emily framed on his wall. He planned to study journalism, inspired by Clara and Emily's courage. The desert kept its silence, but it was no longer heavy with secrets. Clara's markers stood as quiet sentinels, her truth finally told. The key takeaway lingered. One person's fight, one kid's kindness, one town's resilience could change everything. As Jamal looked out his window at the Atlanta skyline, he smiled, knowing Clara's spirit was out there, in the desert, in him, in everyone who dared to seek the truth.